if you've got someone like Kenneth Branagh, 7-time Oscar nominated, now Oscar winner after Belfast, really wanting you and only you, what that does is it just gives you this level of confidence that you're not used to having. There's this sense of trust. Like, this guy trusts me. He hasn't seen me do it. I haven't auditioned. I haven't done a chemistry. I haven't done anything. He's based on what he's seen from my previous work. He trusts me and he only wants me to play this part. It's an incredible thing.
Hey, I'm your host, Scott Savlov, and welcome to another edition of The Path Here. And with us, actor, producer extraordinaire, a man from Ireland, Jamie Dornan. Hey, Jamie, how are you?
I'm good, Scotty. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. You know, when I first met you, some friends had said, there's a guy coming over. You'll love him. He's a great guy. Go play golf. You had never played a golf course in Los Angeles. We met up, and I had our host in Los Angeles because I live in San Diego and you live in different places. Yeah. And you're visiting and doing your work stuff like you do when you come to the States. You come to Los Angeles and you'll do your work things. We met up, and the guest that we had with us was Andy Roddick.
Correct.
And I come to find out years afterwards that you're an Andy Roddick enthusiast. You were a fan growing up of Andy Roddick.
Yeah, I like the way he played the game. I played a ton of tennis when I was younger. I'm really terrible at tennis now. It's really frustrating. I don't know why. Like, it's one of those things where I'm just not good anymore. And it's not like an age thing. It's like I've forgotten how to play. I did my first level of coaching when I was 16 in tennis. I was decent at it. And I'm really crap at it now. But so I've always been a big tennis fan, not probably as much as golf, but big fan. I always liked the sort of determination and the grit in which Andy Roddick played. So it was, and I didn't know we were going to be playing with him that day, so it was a strange thing. Turn up and Andy Roddick was there, and he's a serious golfer, as you know. I mean, he's a very competitive golfer.
Well, it was funny because you looked at me and you go, "That's Andy Roddick, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much."
Yeah.
And it was just like game on. We had a good, nice walk and we're able to get to know each other, which is cool. You're an actor, you're a producer, and yet you're from a town, ironically, Hollywood, just spelled differently. Hollywood, in Ireland with one L, correct? Just not
correct.
Two.
No, one L. There was probably a time, hundreds of years ago where it was called Hollywood, but in my lifetime and generation before me and before them, it's always been Hollywood. Like, it's just called Hollywood. So it's strange to have ended up working in Hollywood, being from a place called Hollywood. But it's now famous. Like, it's famous because Rory McIlroy's from Hollywood. So, like, if you're going into Hollywood now, it has and has done for 12 years or so. If you're going to Hollywood now, it has signs on the way into the town saying, "Welcome to Hollywood, home of Rory McIlroy." It's his town. I've nothing to do. They've long forgotten about me. It's all about Rory.
Well, I think you're being most humble in that descriptive. What's your memory of the town of Hollywood and your upbringing in that?
Friendly people, real community vibe. It's 6 miles outside of Belfast. The whole of Northern Ireland, the whole of Ireland really is, there's an openness to people. I think that and there's a sort of desire to please people and sort of welcome people. It's a time, particularly now. When I was growing up, people didn't really want to come and visit the north of Ireland for obvious reasons. And luckily that's changed. It's changed probably more so since I left, to be honest. I left 20 years ago this August. I left 21 years ago to go to university, but I dropped out after a year. But I've been away a long time. But now, Belfast itself is a brilliant cosmopolitan city. It's got 3 Michelin star restaurants, maybe even 4 actually now, and they shoot loads of stuff there, Game of Thrones and Dairy Girls in the Fall, all this big stuff, and it's it's incredibly
They should do a movie about Belfast.
you know what? Yeah, they actually, they should. They really should. I'll get on that. I know some people. Leave that with me. But I had Hollywood. It's sort of its own energy outside of Belfast. It's a fairly good mix of Catholic Protestant, which isn't the case in everywhere in that part of the world. There's some great schools, but I went to school in Belfast. But Hollywood's right on the sea. There's a Belfast Loch there, which goes out into the Irish Sea. Some great golf courses around there. There's a reason why I had a very happy childhood, and a very middle class childhood, and was wanting for nothing. But there's a reason why stuff's films there now, because everything. It's a great place to grow up for this reason too. Whether you want the beach, the mountains, the forest, a city centre, whatever, it's all within like half an hour. It's a small place. So for film productions, that's an amazing thing to have at your disposal. Not going, right, we have guys with 6 hour drive, or we've got to fly to this part to get like a forest, or. So, and as also in the same breath as a kid growing up, to have all that stuff around you with that accessibility is a big thing, And my youth was just sport, really. It was all about sport for me. That's all I remember. Bit of drama, club stuff, and bit of.
What did you play? What sports?
So I played a bit of golf, not very well. My main sport was rugby. I went to a very big rugby school, the biggest rugby school in the north of Ireland, where rugby was taken incredibly seriously, and it really mattered. You really cared about it. It's kind of all you cared. For me personally, it's kind of all I cared about. I saw school as a place to make friends, try to meet girls, and get confidence there, and play rugby. Really, and I got most of it. I wasn't great with the girls, but I've got the same group of mates that I've had since I was a very young man today still, and that school gave me that, and rugby gave me that. So that was a big thing, and track and field. What we call athletics, you call track and field. But I sprinted competitively at school. So yeah, but I was just very active, and even where we lived, I was so happy just with a ball, any shape of ball, any kind of ball. Just give me a ball and a patch of grass. Even now, Scott, I'm like that now. Like, essentially, I turned 40 in very, very soon. I'm still like that. Like, give me a ball and I'm just totally happy. That's all I need. It's so simple. I don't care, what the circumstances are. If I have a ball, ideally I have people to play with the ball, whether it's rugby ball, soccer ball, whatever. But that's my happy place.
What did your parents do?
So my dad was an obstetrician, gynecologist, very, very prominent one, where we came from, delivered over 6,000 babies in Belfast. So
wow.
When you think that there's only 1.5 million people in the whole of Northern Ireland, that's a lot of babies. So it's, so many times people coming up to me, in bars and restaurants, whatever, when I'm at home. Particularly as things I've become recognized or whatever, I'm always like, oh, they probably like me in this job or this, and they're like, all they want to say is, your dad delivered me, or your dad delivered my brother, or whatever it is. So he had that kind of name
That's
at
cool,
home,
though.
Yeah, very cool. He was very beloved at home, and very much. He spent vast majority of his career at the same hospital. The Royal Maternity, which is at the Royal Victoria, which is in the middle of West Belfast, so a real hot spot for division around there, and a lot of the problems in Belfast were around that area. But if someone needs to give birth, that's not a religious thing. They go to the safest place, and so as a result, I think my dad. I lost my dad just over a year ago, and as a result, when there was from both prominent figures from both sides of the religious divide came forward and had very lovely things to say about my dad because of the position that he held and where he held it for so long. So dad was a very impressive doctor, professor of medicine. My mother died when I was young. I was 16. And mom was a nurse originally. That's how dad and her met. They met at
Wow.
they used to have a sort of communal hospital swimming pool, outdoor pool in Belfast, which wouldn't have got a lot of use, as you can imagine. And my mum was climbing. My mum was a terrified swimmer. Like, she was really scared of the water. So I always find the way they met crazy because mum hated swimming and really couldn't swim very well. But she was in the pool and she was climbing out of the steps, and my dad saw her climbing out of the steps, and that was it. And then actually, when that pool then got filled in to make a car park 25, maybe 30 years ago, dad recovered the steps. So we had these pool steps in our at our house
Really?
that I grew up in, that my dad first saw my mother on. So yeah, she was a nurse, and then once she had, I have two older sisters. So once she had kids, she worked in antiques. She worked in an antique shop for a long time. She worked as a Heinz baby food advisor for a while, like lots of different little things. Never went back to the nursing, but
Right.
yeah, but I was very lucky with my
Well, it sounds
family.
pretty romantic though for your dad to have gotten
Yeah,
those as
yeah,
significant as those pool steps are.
yeah. It was an amazing thing, and I then weirdly I met my wife on some steps at a friend's house. It's not, they don't have the house anymore. I proposed to my wife on the same steps. And then when they were selling the house, I asked, could I get a little piece of the steps? So, like father, like son, I asked, and they chipped a bit of the stone off. So I have this bit of stone from the steps that I met my wife on. So it's a similar sort of situation.
That's fantastic.
Mhm.
When you were with that kind of loving environment and you were young, what did you envision yourself doing?
I think if you're from a small place, you are kind of programmed to a certain point to think small, is my belief. You're sort of funneled through the system. Everyone's doing the same thing around you, and you're going, well, yeah, this is what's ahead of me. I'll go, well, maybe go off to England or Scotland or anything, for maybe the south of Ireland for university, maybe stay in Belfast for university, whatever, and then we'll come back. We'll come back to Belfast, and then that's where my life will be. And I always thought like that, and particularly with playing rugby and stuff. And I thought, I'll play probably just like good like club rugby and be an estate agent or have a job like something local. And I think it's actually,
Right.
to be honest with you, Scott, it took my mum dying to obviously it does something to you in a massive way. It changes
Right.
your entire being and sense of self and vision of the future when something like that happens to you. But then four of my mates were killed in a car accident a year after my mother died. At a very tumultuous time around my mid to late teens at home, and it just totally changed me in loads of different ways. And I think it opened me up to this thing of like, these boys were taken, they're 17 years old, that just passed their driving test, and they were killed in this freak accident. And I lost my mother. She was only 50. Like, all these things, and I thought like, I have my whole life ahead of me here, and I want to expand my horizons. It made me want to just do something other than what was expected of me, maybe, or what seemed to be in the plan, being from that island. And it's not like I went, right, I'm going to be an actor and here I go, I'm going off to London at that. But I just knew that I wanted to do something that wasn't what was laid out for me. I realized that there's so many other ways to make something of yourself. And I don't think if I hadn't gone through what I went through, I don't think I would have realized that, maybe. And it gave me this sort of confidence or urge to explore.
For someone like yourself, who had sports on your mind and just trying to find yourself then, how did you think about doing things like which you evolved into, whether it be modeling or acting? And which came first for you as far as sampling? Which did you try first?
Modeling really. I mean, I'd always acted like I'd done drama stuff at school. I'd done youth theatre outside of school. I'd done amateur dramatics outside of school. It's not like I hadn't scratched that itch at all. I had, but I didn't take it as seriously as I took sport. So it got to a point where you had to pick one. Are you gonna is your time midweek after school going to be spent training for rugby, or is it going to be spent rehearsing for a play? And I picked rugby. I was like, that's where my heart lies, whatever. Not to think, because you're never going, I'm going to play rugby, I'm going to play for Ireland and make a living out of rugby, or maybe some tiny part of you convinces yourself you can. On the same note, you're also not going, oh, I'm going to rehearse for this play because one day I'll be an actor. Like that, maybe now more, this is, 20 odd years ago, but maybe now there's more of a option, or more of a sort of openness and belief that you can do something like that, being from there. But
right.
I didn't feel like that was a legitimate career path or anything. And so it's only when I dropped out of uni that I went, I don't really know what I'm doing with myself. I don't really have a plan. But I had gone, my sister had sort of forced me, because I had this summer where I just was really useless, for want of a better word. Like I drank every day. I barely played golf. I honestly just bummed around with my mates, doing nothing, achieving nothing. But telling my dad, listen, let me go off to London and I'll work in a pub and everything will be grand. And it was in that summer that my sister said, look, you just need to do something. And she'd seen this thing called Model Behavior, which was like an early reality TV show, I guess, where you went and I sort of basically forced me out the door to go to that. And that I didn't want to be a model. Jesus, like what kid grows up? Again, maybe now I'm different. I don't know. I was not the kid growing up going, I want to get my photograph taken for money. I just wasn't on my radar. But then I went okay. I got through to London stages of it, but then got kicked out really quickly. But it was enough for me to go, oh, right, look, maybe there's something there. Maybe I can do that. Even though these professional people had told me that there wasn't a future in it, there's part of me that went, that's enough to tell my dad. I was like, I work in a pub. The people on that show, because I went up to them after and said, look, I know you've kicked me off the show, but do you think I have what it takes? And they said, well, no, listen, if you ever come to London, let us know. And I took that as like, oh, move to London and we'll make you a load of money. So about, 2 months later, 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to London. And I'll never forget that journey for so many reasons. My suitcase was broken and it just kept opening and everything would fall out. And I just about thought I'd fixed it and cracked it. And I got on the Stansted Express, which is a train that takes you from Stansted, which is like the worst London airport's miles away, into London. And I pulled it on the train and it all opened. And I lost one shoe down onto the train tracks. And I remember going like, geez, this is the start of my new adult life, this London adventure. August, 2nd of August, 20th of August, 2002. So I had one shoe and a broken bag, but I had a job. Honestly, I had a job in a pub. I knew I had a job in a pub. Someone had fixed that up for me before I went. I'd never worked in a pub before. But that was enough, and it was enough for my dad. And I went to the modelling agency the day, because I'd been on the show in some way, they couldn't give me a contract or take me on because I'd participated in the show until some date, and that date was 3 months away. So I just worked full time in a pub for 3 months. I could have gone to another agency, but I was a bit like, these were like the biggest one and whatever. So literally on the day that they said I could go, I turned up there and I was like, guys, I'm here. And they're like, what are you doing here? I was like, you told me, you couldn't represent me until this date. And wow, you're really here? And I said, yeah. And the luckiest thing was a woman called Tandy Anderson, who owned the agency, ran the agency, because Select Model Management, huge agency. Tandy happened to be there that day, and she went, "Who's this?" And I went, "Oh, hi, I'm Jamie." And she goes, "I like your face." And I said, "Okay." And that was it. And that was it. They took test shots, and then I did small crappy jobs for a while, but still working in the pub. Then I started to work more, cut down to part time in the pub, and then had to quit the pub because it all sort of kicked off in quite a big way for me in that world. But I wasn't still at that point, Scott, thinking, "Oh, this is a gateway to acting." I kind of was, but it was only about a year or two into it that I realized that there was other opportunities maybe through this path. So it was a strange road.
Well, you're downplaying also the fact that you were a top model. You kind of matriculated pretty quickly. I mean, what would you say was your first big modeling break?
I worked with Bruce Weber a couple of times early on. 3 months after I started, I did like an Abercrombie and Fitch campaign. I'm essentially naked running around the hills of Montauk. Like it's like boy from Belfast. I was like, what is happening here? But then I did a Calvin Klein campaign that in 2003. That was
pretty big though.
It was big. It was with Natalia Vodianova, who was still a big model, but it was like the biggest like new sort of supermodel. Lovely Russian girl, really nice girl. And it was a big group thing. It was Natalia. It was very much her campaign, and then a load of like hangers on. And I was very much a hangers on. But something happened on that trip. We were in Hawaii. It was all night shoots because we wanted the black sand. It was all night shoots, so it was kind of a weird thing. Everyone sort of partying during the day and having drinks and sleeping, and then sort of it was very strange. Anyway, we were doing the shoot, and the Natalia is this beautiful girl, and she was sort of writhing around in the sand, trying to being very sexy or whatever. And I don't know. There's like all the other boys. They were like, this guy Carl Templer, who's a big stylist. Michael Janssen was a photographer. All these big people are in it. Fabian Baron, who was the art director, were all there, and like there was just a reluctance to just sort of writhe around in the sand with Natalia for whatever reason. They were looking at the boys, going, "Is anyone gonna?" I don't know. There's little Brazilian boys, and they were just sort of staring, and it was very strange. I remember just going, "Why is no one coming forward? Like, I'll do that. I'll lie around with her in there. That looks great." And I sort of, I essentially raised my hand and said, like, "Coach, I'm ready. Put me in the game." And I sort of yeah, put me in. I went in, and we ended up sort of really just Michael Janssen. Suddenly the energy shifted. We took all these photographs, and then that was the campaign. It was her and I. And I was not. I was not meant to be front and central in that. I didn't get paid front and central for that. But when the campaign came out, it was just like, poof, it was Natalia and me. It was all over New York on billboards and everything, and it just changed everything, because suddenly it looked like I was just the Calvin Klein guy, even though I was just one of like, there's like 10 dudes there. But I was the only one who wanted to like play in the sand with a supermodel. It was very strange. And then after that at Steamroll, I did 7 campaigns for Calvin Klein, I think. Talking about it now, like I had fun, like I liked it. And, Ava was amazing. Kate Moss was amazing. Natalia, I worked with great people, a lot of the photographers and stylists, and everyone was great. But I remember going, I don't want to be in like 30s and 40s modeling. I just didn't. I knew I didn't want to do that. And I kind of got out. I got out literally at like 29, or 30. Maybe I did it for like a decade, and then I was like, then my career, kicked off as an actor, and
From your success, GQ ranked you as one of the 25 biggest male models of all time, not just a year of all time, which is quite a lovely accomplishment to say that. You'll have to remind your daughters of that as they get older.
I don't think they'd ever believe that. I'm not even sure I believe that. That's news to me. I never heard that.
But you also started doing some commercials, right? And the commercials help some ways bridge the gap between
Yeah.
modeling and acting so you could showcase your ability to, do different things.
It's true. Yeah, I did start to do that, particularly as I got a bit later. I did like a Levi's commercial that was sort of a big deal at the time, and did a couple of other things that I guess made you comfortable in front of a motion capture camera. I think modeling in general, just straight modeling, photographs, also is something that can really help with acting because you're comfortable around a lens. I mean that's a big thing. Have a lens, someone trying to document your movements and trying to capture something. It's essentially film is a sort of variation of that. It's an escalation of that. So I think being comfortable in front of a camera that modeling gave me and doing the commercials gave me really stood me in good stead once I wanted to sort of act.
Well, it probably also helped open the doors to getting recognition and notice as you're transitioning or pivoting into acting. And within that space, what would you say was your first big break as you're trying to evolve and pivot from modeling? As you said, it was kind of behind you a little bit, but at the same time, you decided to pivot into acting. What would you categorize as your first big break that got you recognized or noticed that you can actually act?
There's so many moments in my career that I think were like turning points, right? The first, when I got an acting agent.
That's the nature of our show.
Right, there we go. Well, my first, when I got an agent, my first ever audition was for Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, which I got, and I did, and I shot it, and it was a Sony Pictures Studio movie. Sofia Coppola had literally just won Academy Awards for Lost in Translation, so it was a very exciting project to get. It wasn't a huge part, but it was an important part in it. Not a big like acting showcase by any means, with what I had to do in it, but it got me a big American agent, and it got me my foot in the door, I guess, but then I sort of didn't really work for a long time, or didn't do big work or consistent work for a while, until the two other turning points, I guess. I did this show called Once Upon a Time. It was a big ABC network show that felt like a real turning point at the time. I got killed off after 9 episodes. I did the pilot, and before we started, the pilot got picked up, and before we started shooting it, they told me I was being killed off. So it was a really strange thing. And I remember truly thinking that was the end of my career. I remember going like, well, they've obviously tested this pilot, and the feedback has been, we love it, let's green light it, but we don't like that guy, and he's the only person we don't like, so let's kill him off. So that's where my head was at with it. Little did I know that actually it was the best thing ever happened to me being killed off that show, because it suddenly I was free. Like within 6 months of being killed off, I got this job called The Fall, which totally transformed my career. If I'd been still in that show in Once Upon a Time, I wouldn't have been available to do The Fall. So, it's one of those turnaround moments, where it's like thinking that's it. Like I had this one shot, and it's not going to work out. And then the best thing ever was that it didn't work out. And so The Fall was feels like the biggest turning point. I feel like I've had a couple of turning points in the last 12 months too. It's funny. It's an evolving thing, a career, and you hope that it continues to evolve and grow, and the goalposts keep changing as you get more good things. And I like that about it. I like that about doing this for a living. I like that constant sort of, you're always striving, you're never satisfied. I think that's probably quite a good thing because it keeps you hungry for it, which is important.
Your break with 50 Shades, very loyal fan base to it. So to be cast into that role, there's some positives, some negatives, but it definitely helped also project you as the leading man in a lot of ways, even beyond The Fall, because you had tremendous critical acclaim for doing The Fall.
Yeah.
But when you did 50 Shades, give me an example of a positive coming from not necessarily the role of 50 Shades. I'm talking
Yeah.
about, in your mind, what was a real positive that came from being cast in that character?
Like massive opportunity. You know, everything that's come after 50 Shades wouldn't have come after it had I not done it, you know. And if you're in a film, sort of no matter how well it's received, and it wasn't received well critically at all, and that's no news to anyone. But it made a shit ton of money. But it wasn't, you know, critics destroyed me, and it's tough to be honest with you. It's not great, you know, particularly off the back of something like The Fall, where nominated for BAFTA, won a load of other awards, best reviews ever. So you're riding high, and then you do this thing that's this big opportunity, and it's going to be on this massive scale, and then everyone's saying horrible stuff about you. You're like, Jesus, right? Okay, this is a proper ride, you know. But you know, every opportunity, as I said, I think that all the independent film I've done, all the really good like stories and sort of work that was really important to me that came after was off the back of it. They can't budget and finance a independent film in that 5 to 15 million range off your name if you haven't been in a movie that's made a ton of money. That's just the reality of it. But also because of the negativity around it, I felt since that I feel like I'm on a bit of a mission to try to convince people that I'm better than you think I am if that's all you've seen of me, you know. And I've done work that's really helped with that. And then it particularly in the last year with the success of Belfast and the show I did called The Tourist, that were the most well reviewed things of my career so far. They've done a lot to build that wall back up. I think it feels that way, and everything I'm doing now and everything I have planned for in the next while is really truly exciting stuff for me, and it feels like there's been a bit of a shift. So, you know, so it's a really cool thing to have experienced a massive franchise like that and all that goes with it, all the positivity, all the scrutiny. It's a cool thing.
I remember when we first met, I had asked you because we were doing some stuff and the people I was working with said, you know, Jamie doesn't have any social media. And I'm like, I asked you and you're like, have you ever seen those movies? And I'm like, no, I know the book. And
Yeah,
you're like, okay, well, that's good. And then you
yeah.
said, well, I can't have social media, you know, and and be in that series. And it was fascinating to me because I never thought about it that way, which then made me start thinking about you and just going back to what you said much earlier about taking a little piece of basically the house where you had met your
Hmm.
wife. How did you meet her?
We met on the 27th of February 2010. I knew who Millie was. I'd heard of this. I knew who she was. She's an amazing composer now, and is particularly in the last couple of months killing it. And it's so exciting what's happening with her career. But back then she wasn't that. Back then I knew her as an actor. She was an actress, and so that's why I knew of her, and I knew that, you know, I'd once seen her at an audition, and I sort of like, oh, I fancy her and whatever. I didn't, you know, I've never been a confident guy with like the first line with people. I'm just crap at it. Anyway, I was with some friends, and someone said, look, oh, we're going to meet some friends up at this house party. Amelia Warner's there, blah, blah, blah. And I went, oh, Amelia Warner's there? I was like, I'm going to go. And I went up, and there she was sat on the step, and we talked for like 4 hours, honestly, just incredible like conversation. And when we worked out that we were on the same, I said goodnight, I left the party, and we discovered that we were on the same flight the next day going back to the UK, and that we lived within half a mile of each other in London. So I picked her up to go to the airport in my little rental car that I had, and I I picked her up and I wore a Christmas sweater for some reason, because I thought if nothing happens from this, she'll remember me. That was my thinking, as the guy who like picked her up in a Christmas sweater. So that was it. We flew back and we went on a date, I think, that night. I knew really early on that I'd marry her. I really did. I knew that night, to be honest. And that's it. And, 12 years and 3 kids later, here we are.
But the romance, obviously, you inherited that, the romantic side
Yeah.
of yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Her support of you and what you do had to be unusual, I would assume, during 50 Shades.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Luckily, she knows a romantic man who's madly in love with his wife, as you are. That helped
Yeah.
ease that burden. But her support of you, I think, probably allows you some latitudes on your career too, where you could take more chances doing
Yeah.
for you, taking a role. Describe
Hmm.
that for me.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's an unbelievable feeling, but I don't know any other way to feel totally supported by your spouse. You know, that's just always been our way. We've all just supported each other the whole time. We're both at this I personally believe I'm at the most exciting juncture in my career at the moment. She certainly is. Everything that's happening with her is incredible. And I do think we've harnessed that with each other. I think we've supported each other in the right ways, I think. And I think it helps with what you're saying there, that she used to be an actor, so she understands what that is. And she did it for a long time, from when she was 8 or something. She did her first, she was like, did it when she was a kid and stuff. Her mother was an actor, her dad was an actor. So, she really understands all that. So when it comes to something like 50 Shades, she knows what it is. She knows it's, make believe. And she knows the reality of like what doing a job like that is, and the opportunities that'll come from doing a job, and the experience that'll come from doing that job. So it's been a lovely thing to experience with someone else and share with someone else. I think for both of us, working in the same industry is really beneficial. There's an innate understanding there of what each of us have to do, sometimes need to do, sometimes have to go away, sometimes need to, she has a studio here at the house. She needs to go away, and when she's working, she's up in that studio, and I'll take the kids, like that balance where we've got that down. We just have, we've got a great thing with that. We also have a real openness with each other about saying yes to basically everything. And I'm a big golfer, as you know. We played a lot of golf together. I want to do one trip a year, one boys trip. I go with the same guys, of all of which and we do, just the four of us. We do a golf trip every year, and then maybe I do one other thing where I play the Dunhill, or one other thing where it's like 4 days away. They're my two things for golf. I never play golf at the weekends. I've never played once at the week, apart from these 2 trips. I never play weekend golf, because I'm lucky because of my job. If I'm off during the week, and I can play golf when the kids are at school. I'll never, when my wife's at home with the kids, go, hey, I'm going off for 7 hours on a Saturday. Won't do it to her. It's not fair. And anytime my wife says, hey, do you mind if I was thinking, I go, yes, do it. Because if that's a girl trip with the girls or something, my wife's an only child. A lot of times she wants to do stuff where she wants to do her own thing. She's an incredibly avid reader. She reads, a couple of books a week, Sometimes she just wants to go off and do something where she just has her time and space to herself. And I love that, and I want to support that, So we've got a really good thing with that, where and I think everyone should be like this. Also, I've never been one of those guys who suffers with crazy jealousy, and I trust my wife implicitly as she does me. So there's never been that thing of oh, you going away with the girls? I don't. Where are you going? Oh, go and have fun. Go and have fun. What? If I get to go away with the boys for a 3-day golf trip, she should be able to do whatever she wants. So I think that's a really healthy thing in a relationship that we've always had, of letting each other do our own things. We're together all the time, and we also make a point of doing a trip away from the kids every year. Just Millie and I go away again. If anyone's listening to this and they're in a relationship, that's really important. I think when you've kids, to just get away and have that time together. Where we were here first. We loved each other first before the kids came along. And you've got to have that time together. So she's just been the perfect partner. I have to say, we just it's it. I know you have that with your wife too. I'm just very lucky with it, Scotty. I just we have a great understanding of each other.
And it's admirable. You mentioned earlier Belfast, and
Yep.
for someone growing up in that area, as you've identified, it kind of had a little bit more of an importance. I'm not saying that the other roles that you've had are not
Mm,
as important, but this kind
mm.
of had a little bit more weight on your shoulders in some ways. Meeting someone like, Sir Kenneth Branagh, what was that like? I mean, you're not in that time, luckily. You don't have to necessarily audition.
Mm,
You can read for something to see if there's chemistry. And I imagine during COVID, even
mm,
it's challenging because it limits people interacting and feeling that chemistry. What
mm.
was that experience like for you, a young man from that area, to be thought of and meet such a big character as Branagh?
Yeah, it was. It was very strange. I'm lucky. I did one this strange, cool European director. I did an audition for him, about 6 years ago, maybe. But apart from that, that's probably the only one I've done in 10 years. But I would have happily. It doesn't mean I don't want to. I would have. I'm terrible at them, by the way. But I would have happily auditioned for Kenneth Branagh for Belfast. But for whatever absurd reason, it came to me with the offer. He wanted me to do it right from the start. It is a story that obviously means so much to him. It's essentially his, early childhood story. But it's a story that means so much to me, and I maybe will never do a story that means as much to me, because I'm not going to do another movie called Belfast. I'll do plenty of other movies, hopefully set in Belfast, but not literally called Belfast. It's unique in that way. So to feel wanted in that way was massive for me, because what it did was, if you've got someone like Kenneth Branagh, 7-time Oscar nominated, now Oscar winner after Belfast, really wanting you and only you, what that does is it just gives you this level of confidence that you're not used to having. There's this sense of trust. Like, this guy trusts me. He hasn't seen me do it. I haven't auditioned. I haven't done a chemistry. I haven't done anything. He's based on what he's seen from my previous work. He trusts me, and he only wants me to play this part. It's an incredible thing. Like, obviously, I've done a lot of jobs like that where obviously I haven't auditioned and it's been given to me like that. But at that sort of level with someone like Ken and everything that he comes with, and he's such an actor. He's an unbelievable actor. Obviously, he's multi-nominated as an actor for Academy Awards. So for him to have that trust in me was huge, and it just changed the whole course of making the movie for me. Just knowing that he wanted me there in that capacity, especially to play someone so important to him, to portray his father, one of the most important people in his life. Obviously, that was. It was a massive thing, and it was an incredible experience, and everything that's come after it has been incredible, and the whole award season and all of that, and how much love we got for it. It's I hope that I experience that sort of thing again, but if I don't, I'm glad I did, and I with those people, because it felt like a real family, and I'll forever be grateful to Kenneth Branagh for that.
You also have a very charitable side too. A lot of people here, say in California, are not as aware of your commitment to your charitable effort, which
Hmm.
is pretty significant. I mean, you are a very philanthropic person, very family oriented, but also for really good causes. Just address a little bit about some of the things that are pet projects of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. I've been patron to a couple of charities. And it's in the last decade that have meant something to me. One of them was a charity that my dad started, actually, and my dad was the president of right up, until his death just over a year ago, which was originally called NIMBA, the Northern Irish Mother and Baby Appeal, and it's to help parents with premature babies in Northern Ireland. So I was a patron of that for a very long time, and then a few years ago I became a patron of NIPANC, which is a Northern Irish pancreatic cancer charity. My mother died of pancreatic cancer, so that is something that's very close to my heart, and managed to raise a lot of awareness for it, and it's still in that terrible form of cancer. And it's not totally uncurable, but Jesus, it's close. And so raise a bit of awareness and money for that, which has been great. And you feel like you have some sort of platform and some sort of following, a literal following now that I know I didn't when we met. I wasn't on social media, but I cracked during lockdown, the first lockdown, and also felt there'd been enough distance away from 50 Shades that I could maybe creep back in there. I hover over the delete button on Instagram every day of my life. I truly do. I'm sometimes like, what am I doing? Like, why did but alas, I'm still in the game. But having that platform and that
I do like your post, by the way.
Yeah, they're a bit crazy. I'm a bit stupid. I always like look back at them and regret them. I'm like, well, they just come across like a total idiot. But I have a reach there, I guess, to a point. So if you can help out charities and with using that, then that's something I'll do, forever.
Lastly, if you had to say to me, I've done all these different things. I'm kind of at the apex. I feel like I'm hitting my stride as an actor, producer, something in that space, but you were kind of wanting something to come across your computer, turn on, you're checking your emails, and this script comes across. What would be something that you would probably surprise people and even yourself wanting to take some kind of role? What would that role be?
I don't know. I'm always hesitant to think in those terms because it's such an unpredictable game. I sometimes think if you put something out there that you really want, like I can do that internally, but if I actually put it out there, I'm always like, it probably just won't happen now that I've said it, in a forum like this. And right. To be honest, I sort of almost don't know the answer. Even in the last 2 years, I've done very broad, crazy comedy. I've done very drama. I've done stuff in between. I'm doing something that's very action led at the moment. I feel like I'm lucky in that way that I've managed to play lots of different genres so far in my career. So as a result, there's kind of anything that could come across my inbox that would pique my interest. Could be anything, And I'm drawn to lots of different things. I'm not there going, I just want to do really serious drama, or I just want to do action, I'm not like that. I really, as a person, I'm not like that. I feel like I can be very comfortable in lots of different environments. I think actually, to be honest with you, that is the thing I think I'm best at, is I feel like I can chat to anyone, no matter what your background or history is or whatever. So as a result, I'm drawn to lots of different worlds. To be honest, my main thing is I've written a script that you know about it, but my friend and I wrote a script that we're going to produce and hopefully make. I'm going to be in it too. My biggest thing would be in my inbox, someone coming and saying, here's your money to go make your movie. And we are very much in that process at the moment. Like literally, I'm having a big call about it today, about the finance of it. It's all becoming quite real. So that would be to see something that my friend and I created ourselves, to see that made. That would be the biggest thing for me.
Well, we want to thank you for coming on the path here and sharing a little bit about yourself. I always enjoy our time together. I learned something new about you just about every time we get a chance to hang out, whether it's on a golf course or wherever we go. Yeah. And I thank you for carving out, with our time difference, it's always interesting, but you are quite gracious and kind to come on the path here. And thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Scott. I loved it. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to write us on thepathhere.com to have one of your questions featured on a future episode. You can follow me on Instagram @Scott Savlov. If you want to send us a tweet or follow us on Instagram, it's at The Path Here Podcast. Hey, I'm Scott Savlov, and you've been listening to The Path Here.